This time involving Loud House vs. Casagrandes, it centers around elderlies. And considering that this is the first time I'm ever going to talk about Lincoln's grandpa, it's really saying something knowing full well that it's surprising that I didn't mention him in previous Loud House projects, including the broken character development of Lincoln Loud, but it's really saying something that the huge cast of characters in this show, along with its spin-off, are difficult to get used to, all the while worth remembering. Worth remembering of how good they are, but at the same time, difficult to enjoy their character development. Anyway, The Old and the Restless from the Loud House, and 15 Candles from the Casagrandes, even though that both episodes are completely different when it comes to Abuela, who is Rosa, doing the activities for Ryan, The Old and the Restless is mainly a Lincoln and Grandpa episode. Pop, who is Albert in this episode, wants to spend time outside of Sunset Canyon's retirement home, but Seuss, who is the nurse who takes care of every elderly in the building, refuses to have Albert and Lincoln do anything whatsoever for fun. You know, considering that in the later seasons of the Loud House where we get to see villains do stuff to torture and completely hurt the characters, Seuss really felt really forgettable after people watch this episode and people question onto why we keep getting villains like Vic. But in all honesty, it's really saying something that this episode was a lot more forgettable in my point of view in comparison to other episodes. In 15 Candles, Rosa wants to celebrate Quinceañera with Ryan, and considering when it comes to Mexican culture that do these types of celebrations, it's gonna be a lot more difficult to be in Ryan's position, and in all honesty, I'd rather be in Lincoln's position on just trying to find his grandfather. Otherwise, if you ask me, I don't want every single Saturday to be a celebration. It just isn't worth it. But there's more into why Rosa is doing that, but we'll get to that later. Lincoln's relationship with Pop is like Lincoln's relationship with Luna, since that they don't get a lot of screen time together. And considering that Pop doesn't get as a lot of screen time as Luna for obvious reasons, it kind of sums up onto why I don't remember him that much. And even though that he was good in this episode, maybe there's a reason onto why that he's in a retirement home, knowing full well that he doesn't have much to work with. Up until later in the series, well, he's gonna get married, but that's a different story. Upon rewatching The Old and the Restless, it really feels like an episode that is technically from season 1, since that it was in production, and considering that 11 Louds of Leapin' came out after this episode, other episodes, including the infamous Brawl in the Family, were probably in production before people were taking this show seriously when it comes to the Christmas episode. So for me personally, watching this episode involving Lincoln and Pop really feels like the episodes that you would expect involving season 1. So with this being one of the first episodes of season 2, it's not an issue for me completely. I just felt like that upon watching the rest of this episode and just seeing what Pop is, it's really saying something that I remember him the least when it comes to the cast of characters. In 15 Candles, since the similarities of The Old and the Restless is focusing on Ryan's relationship with her grandmother or Umbrella in her language, I'm starting to think that they wanted to do a lot more by having Rosa being so into hanging out with Ryan in comparison to Pop hanging out with Lincoln. This episode sums up a lot that Ryan does respect her grandmother, but at the same time, she probably won't be able to do anything of what Lincoln did in The Old and the Restless. Like, if Rosa was in a retirement home and we have an episode focusing on the two in the same ways as the Old and the Restless, I don't think they're going to be able to make it any better, all the while having a different antagonist in order to carry on with the story. I mean, considering that Rosa does all of the work in the apartment when it comes to her place and the neighbors, this really feels like a way for Rosa to be more active rather than being at a retirement home. Maybe that's pretty much a reason onto why Pop-Up doesn't get a lot of episodes in comparison to other characters, considering that he's older than Rosa. Granted, it hasn't been revealed on how old Pop-Up is, but considering that he's in a retirement home, I'm going to assume that he's close to his 70s. That's literally my headcanon when it comes to Pop-Pop's age in this show. With the old TV trope of an elderly coming out of retirement, well, not really out of retirement, but out of the retirement home to hang out with his son or daughter to do activities together, I don't have a problem with that basic trope, but the thing is, they don't do anything interesting with that trope. Like, all I see is Albert doing multiple activities without Lincoln, and considering that he is mostly out of control, he is dysfunctional like the Lau family, except that I think there's a reason onto why we don't get to see him more, so that we don't get to see the negative traits from him. Mainly the negative traits from the sisters that paints them in a negative light. Now look, I understand that grandpas do these types of stuffs. Even my own grandpa who passed away 6 years ago. But considering that all I've seen in this episode is mainly Albert just doing anything of what a grandfather would do by enjoying himself, by doing multiple activities, it really feels like that this is really one of those Loud House episodes that are from season 1, but they were technically in production before the Christmas episode. But it's not a problem, but at the same time, it just doesn't make the episode better in comparison to 15 Candles. Which leads to the antagonist that carries the episode, but mainly for plot convenience. Sue, who's the nurse, and in all honesty, considering that she doesn't appear after this episode, she's literally a plot device. I'm just saying this right now, that considering that her motivations is just to make every elderly miserable, I'm starting to convince that these episodes, despite not being as bad as the other episodes, still didn't age well. Like, every time Sue is on screen, she's forced to smile. I mean, if she isn't forcing herself to smile, then why does she need to take out her frustrations towards the elderlies and Lincoln? Like, if she doesn't do much in this episode other than just giving stress towards the other elderlies, then this really shows that this is basically a generic episode with a generic antagonist being a plot device. And considering that 15 Candles doesn't have an antagonist of some kind, maybe that's for the best to make 15 Candles a better episode overall than The Old and the Restless. If I'm gonna be honest, there's nothing wrong to hang out with your elderly outside of their retirement homes, but in comparison to 15 Candles, Rosa is really into this whole experience with Ryan to the point that she doesn't want anything bad happening in the way. And for that, this episode also gives her development because she never had a quinceañera because her family can't afford one. And considering that she wants to take all this energy to Maria and Ryan, yeah, it really shows that even in the episode that has a similar plot over The Old and the Restless, the Casagrandes still manages to give one of the characters development. Granted, it may be development that is unexpected, but at the same time, you can easily feel bad for Rosa onto why she's doing all this for the majority of the episode. And I would rather pick the ending of 15 Candles over The Old and the Restless, because It's really, really cliched of the elderlies joining together and making a stand for themselves, which is good for elderlies, but at the same time, considering of how cliched and basic this episode is, I'm not really that surprised. It's not a terrible ending, but it's not the best. If anything, Yan throwing the quinceañera for Rosa with everyone, including neighbors, to be part of it, just goes to show that they really did a good job on showing Yan's care towards her grandmother, or Umbrella in her language. Then again, she was trying to make Rosa annoyed with the activities being thrown up in her face, but at the same time, she really realized of how much important it is for Rosa to have a quinceañera with anyone because she didn't have one for herself. Let's be real, if Lincoln was in Yan's position in 15 Candles, he would probably do the same thing even if it may hurt his grandpa, if he ever find out. And considering that Rosa never found out about Yan's plans, then I think it's either for the best for him to do what's right for not only for himself, but also for his grandpa, who is much more older than Rosa despite no age reveal. So yeah, The Old and the Restless is a watchable episode, but in comparison to 15 Candles, 15 Candles is a better episode over the Loud House episode. I'm just gonna say this right now, there is more of a reason onto why the Casagrandes exists, even though it has similar elements from the Loud House, even if there are way too many. I'm giving The Old and the Restless a 6 out of 10, while 15 Candles gets an 8 out of 10, and when it comes to next week, again like last week, there isn't going to be a Loud House vs. Casagrandes video, but you're probably going to be looking forward to that video since it involves Summer Palooza 4 Beach Paradise.